My name is Peter Kett, and I'm here to talk about lions, and I'm also going to talk a little bit about our charity work in the organization called Lion Aid. Now, one of the reasons why I want to talk about lions is because it is something that people do not realize very much about the problems that lions have, and it's actually quite a very sad thing in terms of how few lions are left in Africa these days. So we'll start with the slides, and we'll start talking about lions in just sort of general culture that we're used to. And people don't realize it, but we have lots and lots of statues and paintings and various representations of lions from all over the world. In this one here, what I would like you to look at is the picture all the way on the top left there. And that's a cave drawing from the south of France, and that was drawn about 35,000 years ago. It's the first representation that we have of lions, and it's also probably one of the best that we have of lions. It survives to this day as a real beautiful piece of art. Because one thing that we mustn't forget is that 35,000 years ago, lions were still living in France, and across lots of Europe actually. And then we have some other well-known symbols of lions. For example, the MGM lion on the top and the right there. We have the large lion statues in Trafalgar Square. But also interestingly, we have a statue right in the middle there of lions outside the Imperial Palace in China. Now, lions never occurred in China, but Chinese revered them as animals that represented strength and nobility. And a lot of people had these statues outside their houses to protect the people inside. And then, of course, we've got various things like the Lion King. We've got the Cowardly Lion in some movies. Then we have a painting by Rubens. We have the flag of Sri Lanka, which has a lion on it. We have cars that have symbols of lions. So lions are very much part of our life. So the question then is, well, of course we have The Lion King, it's a very well-known movie. So the question is, if we love lions so much, why should we be worried about them? They should be very well protected, and they're a species that is very well known all over the world. So this is what the talk is about, and what I'm going to do is first tell you that there are three kinds of lions in the world. There is, on the top there, Panthera leo krugeri, which has about 13,000 animals left, and that is a lion that lives in eastern and southern Africa. And then, below that, we have Panthera leo senegalensis. That's a lion that was recently described. Everybody thought lions were all the same. But that Western African lion, of which there are only 400 left, it's critically endangered, is actually very different from the lions in Eastern and Southern Africa. That lion is much more closely related, or even though it occurs in Africa, it is much more closely related to the lion below that, Panthera leo persica, which lives in a very small part of India, in the Gir forest in the western part of India. And that's it. That's it for lions, about 14,000. Now, we, of course, know, or we think we know, a lot of other species that we consider very endangered. For example, we have gorillas. There's about 125,000 of those. African elephants, 400,000 of those. Chimpanzees, we've got 200,000. Orangutans, we've got about 38,000, polar bears, 25,000, white rhinos, 19,000. So all these species that we think, or that we accept as being very endangered, are much more numerous and have larger populations than lions do. So it gives you an idea of how, what problems lions have. So just a pictorial representation here. This is Daniel in the lion's den in about 1960. On the left there, he would have been standing in the lion's den with some lions. A couple of years ago, he would have had none left. And then all the way on the right, he would have if in 2030, if Daniel stepped into the lion's den, he would have been standing there by himself because lions would be extinct by now. This is a map of Western Africa, and to give you an indication, when we talk about numbers like 13,000, things like that, people think, well, that's still a relatively large number. But if you look at Western Africa now, that's a huge area. You can fit the whole of Europe in there a couple of times, and you can see that the story of lions there in Western Africa is looking pretty grim. All the way in the west, in Senegal, there are 16 lions left. There's 350 lions in a couple of places in the middle, and then a very large country, Nigeria, on the right. There's 32 lions on one side and 2 lions on the other. Now, the problem with these very small numbers is that one forest fire, one disease will wipe them out completely. And so these very small populations are also very, very vulnerable, and so practically, except for that one population, 350, we can say with great confidence that lions are pretty much extinct in Western Africa. Now, lions are unusual in terms of cats because they're the only truly social cats. Lions grow up in the bottom right there as cubs, males and females together. Female lions usually give birth to about 2 or 3 cubs, not many survive. But then the females are usually in synchrony in a pride, so that's why you get these large numbers of cubs. And then, of course, they grow up together. Their mothers do a lot of training and feeding. And then, of course, these are on the top right there. This is the sort of symbol of lions that we recognize: the females without the mane and the male with the mane. Now, the reason why lions live in prides and the reason why they're so successful as being social cats is because they can, first of all, in the picture in the top left, you can see that they hunt cooperatively, and that wildebeest in the middle there has no chance. It's completely surrounded by lions. But the other reason why they live in groups is because they can tackle animals which are much larger than them. You can see on the right there's a group of 3 lions. They're attacking an African buffalo. That buffalo weighs about 3,000 pounds, and the females weigh about 150 to 200 pounds. So you can see, working cooperatively, you can bring down very large prey animals. And that actually gives the lions a big advantage in Africa, because if it wasn't for lions, the large prey animals like even elephants and giraffes and these buffaloes, they would have very few predators, if any. One thing about hunting together as a group, you can also see there in the bottom left there, is that you also have to share your food, and that's something that lions are not very good at, and they become very aggressive when they have to share food and when they eat their prey. Lions don't, even though they hunt in groups and they're seen to be very strong animals, they don't have it very easy. You can see here is a male lion weighing about 400 pounds, trying very badly to climb up a tree to get away from the buffaloes down below. And if that lion slipped and fell, he would probably be trampled and gored to death. Now, the main, what I would like to talk about now is the reasons why lion numbers are going down. One of the main threats is disease. And you can see here this lion looks very skinny, and that's not because he hasn't eaten for a long time. It's because he has a disease called feline immunodeficiency virus. That virus is pretty much endemic among lions. Some large populations, for example in the Serengeti and in Botswana, about 95% of all adult lions have feline immunodeficiency virus. What feline immunodeficiency virus does is it doesn't kill you right away. It's just like human immunodeficiency virus. So what happens is that the immune system slowly erodes, and the lions become much more susceptible to other diseases. And then here, and in this clip, here's another lion that's caught a disease, and you can see it's lying together with other lions, and we'll come to that in a second. But you can see the lion is showing a lot of excess salivation, and it's having what it called a grand mal seizure. And this disease is because of canine distemper. You might say, well, lions are feline, so how come do they get canine distemper? And it's communicated to those lions via domestic dogs. So wherever there's contact between unvaccinated domestic dogs and lions, you have a big problem. The other big problem in Africa is of course the amount of land that is taken over by livestock. And livestock and lions don't really mix very well, because lions normally eat, like I said, large prey like buffaloes, elephants, sometimes giraffes, wildebeest, smaller prey like impalas on the right. Here's a map on the left. You can see in the dark red areas and the yellow areas, that's the range of cattle. See, it stretches all the way from Western Africa to Eastern Africa and then down south. And then on the map on the right, in the black, that's where lions occur, and you can see that there's almost a complete overlap between the two. Now, cattle in Africa, and especially in drier places, and these pictures are taken in Kenya and in Botswana, you can see that cattle are grazed on the open savannas. And like I said, that's also where the lions occur. And that's where the guy, you can see him walking there with his cattle in the top right. And in his hand, he's carrying a long spear, because that's something that he needs to have to protect his cattle against lions. Now, most of the predators that are in Africa, like the leopards, the hyenas, and the lions, those are the ones that are largely nocturnal, so they come out at night. And so people in Africa have to take protective measures, and what they can do is they build structures like this. We're looking down from the air, and you can see that what these Maasai have done, for example, is that they built pretty much a fort, where you can see the houses in the center there, and then all around are the enclosures for the cattle. And the cattle come out in the morning and graze, and then they're locked up back again at night. It's not always successful. The lions can get through, and so therefore we have to ask in places like in Kenya, Tanzania, Botswana, South Africa, can lions actually live with humans? And this is one of the areas that we're spending a lot of time working on, because we want to reduce this human-lion conflict. And conflict it is. When lions take cattle, there's often very quick and very serious retaliation. Sometimes up to 6 or 7 lions are killed at once. And again, with so few lions left, these kinds of losses are devastating. So unlike these zebras that are in the front, in the foreground here, you can see this is much more of a situation of modern Africa these days. You've got zebras in the foreground, behind them you've got cattle, and then behind them you've got houses. And the wildlife land is getting very rapidly diminished with human population growth in Africa. Now, the other big threat to lions is something called trophy hunting, where guys like the one shown there in the middle, what they like to do is to go to Africa, pay a lot of money, and then shoot lions dead, and then hang them up on their walls or make them into rugs, etc. Now, some people call trophy hunting conservation, but if you look between the 10 years, 2007 and 2016, over 3,600 lions were shot in Africa and their trophies exported. And of course, almost all were males, because hunters don't like to shoot female lions. So remember, with about 13,000 lions left, and in 10 years, 3,600 adult males were shot, you can see the big problem that trophy hunting is having on lion populations. Also, the problem with trophy hunters is that when they run out of large males, what they do is shoot younger and younger ones. A lot of these lions that you see here in the pictures were killed by trophy hunters, and those lions are about 2 years old, so they've never reproduced. And taking these young males out of a population is very, very damaging to future reproduction in the population. Now, the other big problems that lions have in Africa are things like canned hunting, which I'll explain. There's a lot of cub smuggling that goes on. Cubs are stolen from their mothers and then transported either to places in Africa or outside Africa. And now recently what has been happening is lion bone trade, and I'll talk about that very quickly too. Right, in South Africa what has happened is that about 10,000 lions are bred in cages in very small enclosures, and once they are a little bit large, or you know, while they're still cubs, what happens is that people come and pet them and spend a lot of money to do that, take pictures with them. When they get a little bit older, they're taken on lion walks, and there's volunteers, so-called volunteers, that spend quite a lot of money supposedly helping conservation of lions by interacting with them in the various places that breed them. Now, of course, when those lions grow up, this is the result. They're just used for trophy hunting. The other thing that happens is that those lions, like I said, will be used for their bones. A lot of Asian traditional medicines are now resuming because they've run out of tigers in Asia, and so they're substituting lions, and more lions are being sent to Asia to be part of this lion bone trade. South Africa these days is proposing 800 lion skeletons per year to be sent to places like Vietnam and Laos. Also, I was talking about the cub smuggling and the sale of cubs. A lot of these cubs end up in the Middle East, where owning lions is a status symbol, and you can see they treat them like pets. They even take them for rides in their car there in the bottom right. And then also lions are sold to circuses and zoos. What we have to do is we have to protect the lions better that are in the national parks. We have to fight the diseases that are threats to lions. We can't vaccinate the lions themselves, but for example, with canine distemper, what we can do is we can make sure that the domestic dogs around are properly vaccinated. We have to talk to a lot of politicians in various countries, and especially to do with prohibiting the import of lion trophies, and also to encourage better protection of the national protected areas, and also the better protection of conservation plans for lions where they interact with humans, human-wildlife conflict, for example. And then, of course, we can talk to the Scouts. And this is what we're here for, because lions are at the brink. They're not over the edge, and if we're all very clever now, if we're smart, we can still save what is left, and we can hopefully grow the populations and have them become a little bit more stable. So, what can Scouts do to save lions? Well, a lot of different things. What we would like to see is a lot more interaction with the various scout groups in various parts of the UK, and then also in some other countries, because Baden-Powell actually said that nature study will show you how full of beautiful and wonderful things God has made the world for you to enjoy. And one of the reasons why Baden-Powell set up the Scout movement, in my opinion, is to expose children to nature, to take them out of the inner cities and have them go camping and have them enjoy nature and have them become much more appreciative of nature than they were previously.
Okay, so if we want to actually engage our Scouts with LionAid, we've talked about getting the message out to them. What practical things do you think that they could be doing to actually engage with LionAid?
Well, what I would like to do is at this point introduce Chris McSween, another director of LionAid, and she's actually wearing one of the wonderful LionAid t-shirts. But she can probably tell you in practical ways that the Scouts can help.
Well, the first thing the Scouts can do is shout it far and wide, because as you can see from this presentation that you've had today, people just don't know. People just don't know that we've got 14,000 wild lions left across Africa. People just don't know that there are only 5 viable lion populations left in Africa. The rest are all small populations of 5 animals, 10 animals, 50 animals, and they have very little hope of survival. So we've got an enormous task, and the first thing Scouts can do is help us raise the awareness. Awareness is key, because the more people are aware, the more people go to their politicians, write letters to their politicians in whatever country they are and say, you represent me, I want you as a country to protect lions. That does an enormous job, and we work with politicians, but they need to hear from constituents. They need to hear from the Scout movement. The Scout movement has a wonderful, wonderful reputation. And if the Scouts got together and made a concerted message to the world that they wanted to see lions saved, we're going to lose them in maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years. They will be extinct, and we only have them in zoos. If you don't want that, help us. Write to your politicians. The next thing, which is the thing all charities have, but we really do have this, is we need to fundraise. On our stand, we have got pages of ideas for fundraising. There's all sorts of fun, wonderful things that you can do to help raise money for Lion Aid. All sorts of activities that Scouts can organise round. And they range from things like sponsored walks and sponsored swims and a variety of massive things that you could do. I remember the days, and I'm showing my age now, I don't know whether it still exists, but they used to have Bob a Job Week. And Bob a Job Week, where the Scouts went out and they would render their services to the community, and they'd wash people's cars, and they'd cut hedges, and they'd sweep driveways, and they'd hang people's washing out, and in return for a bob, which was 5p. And it's obviously more these days, and that would go into whatever charitable cause they were fundraising for. So there must be a million ideas, and I've got 2 pages of A4 of them on our stand, and I'm very happy to share it all with you. And come to us and give us your ideas of how you think you can help us. But those are the 2 big things we need, are funds and raising the awareness, and particularly with the people that can make a difference, which is the politicians.
It's very, I think the media, getting the media attention is probably the biggest factor that will help stop the poaching more than anything, because I think people simply just don't realise how many are being killed by these rich people. And, that's the challenge, I think, is whether it's TV advertisement or something, I don't know.
Thank you. Yes, the media attention is very important, and we obviously, like everybody else does, we try to engage with celebrities. We have a wonderful oil painting that was done for us by Ricky Gervais, for example, which we still have as the oil painting, and we sell off the prints, and we had 50 prints made, and he individually signed all of those and numbered them, so they're limited edition prints. So we have things like that going on, and we have wonderful patrons like Diane Keane, who is a wonderful actress, and James Cosmo, who you might have seen in Game of Thrones. But we need to do a lot more. We need to get the media more interested in lions, and it's very difficult because every day the bigger charities are in there with elephants and rhinos, who are also having all sorts of problems, but there are much greater numbers of those left in the world than there are lions. The lions have got a very acute problem, and time is what we don't have for lions. And TV advertising would be absolutely wonderful, but just actually having enough money to get through to do the active conservation work is a huge challenge, and TV advertising is something way out of our reach. But maybe there's a media company out there somewhere that says, you know what, I'm going to help, and I'm going to come in here and do stuff for these guys and help them get the message out, and let's hope that happens. Any other questions?
So you said that some of the bigger charities aren't focusing on lions, and they're looking at rhinos and things like that. Why is that?
Well, there are various reasons, but because most of them are political reasons, I think, not because of the charities being political, but funding has not been made available for lions because they're still trophy hunted. The UK, for example, still supports the importation of lion trophies as a conservation tool, and it's a complete nonsense, and we're trying to persuade them not to. So the UK, for example, is not listening. When you ask for funding for lions, they will give funding for rhinos and elephants, and last year, the year before, they were giving funding for orangutans, but nothing for lions. And so the larger charities are quite savvy, and they are going to put their efforts where they're going to get the funding. We're stubborn people, and we know that the lions are the poor relative that are not getting the funding and are in desperate need, and so we struggle on because, you know, we need to represent lions, because if we don't do it, who else is doing it?